Previously on the Sugar Baby Confessionals.
I changed my profile and then I met a potential sugar daddy. His marriage is one of, it's a business relationship. The affair that hurts somebody is a much juicier story. I'm still a free agent, and now when we spend time together, it's much more meaningful, much more substantial. Should the right thing come my way, I'm not going to let him delay me. And I think that he sort of figured that out. The truth is, I don't know how I would cease to love the Marquis. I actually am seeing somebody. I love him, I adore him, but it's not the same. So either it grows or it doesn't. That's sort of what I'm waiting on.
When I first began this podcast, almost 2.5 years ago now, I never would have imagined what it would turn into. It's been both a forensic examination of Ruby's Sugar Baby experience and a wider look at modern love, dating, friendship, and fidelity in all its forms. You might be wondering how it's affected our friendship. Don't worry, we're still very close. I think it's been difficult at times for Ruby, hearing herself talk about her life. She's always been so breathtakingly honest, making me think of Andrew Macmillan's poetry project exploring what he calls radical disclosure. It has been radical for both of us, if not upending many of my complacently held ideas about monogamy and the nature of love itself, at least rearranging it in a new and dramatic way. Yep, she's feng shuied my brain, moving all the furniture around and applying a fresh coat of paint. I feel like I've got a vast insight into human nature, things I might never truly have understood had my dear friend not been involved. Unlike me, Ruby is a restless star in an untold adventure. When she walks into a room, she wants people to notice, and they do. I once saw her tame a literal angry mob with just her charm. They were picking on a black man on the train, and she faced them all down. By using her advanced ninja skills? Nope, by talking to them. She tamed a group of drunk, aggressive dudes spoiling for a fight. Within 10 minutes, she had them eating out of her hand. What amazed me was that she was able to make it clear how inappropriate and wrong she found their behavior. And yet somehow, she managed to calm them and even get the ringleader to acknowledge their collective idiocy. She even booped one guy's nose. In this time of fractured politics and bitter recrimination between ideologies and political stances, it seemed nothing short of miraculous to me. But her adventures, her willingness to thrust herself into the fray, aren't always blissful or heroic. When we left her last, she was a little tired, working through issues with FP as he struggled to come to terms with her love for the Brit, and the fact that she'd decided she was polyamorous. Join us now, 1.5 years down the line, when we meet again to find out what the outcome's been. Hi, we're back. I'm with Ruby. She's come to stay with me, and we've had a great week. Tell me why you came to visit me and what we've been up to.
Well, hi there, Esty. It's been a while. I came to visit because I love you and I missed you, and it had been too long since I'd had a visit, so that's really pretty much why. And I just needed to get away and clear my head and have some space, It's always good, I think, to give yourself a little bit of alone time from your daily grind. And I hadn't had that in a while.
Yes. Well, I think we've had a great week. What's been the highlights of being in London for you?
Well, I think the highlight has been the fact that the weather's been so nice. Every other time I visited this city, unfortunately, it's pretty much bucketed with rain the entire time I've been here. So that's been really lovely. It's so nice to just get outside, walk around, see the sunshine. It's such a lush green city, and I really enjoy that a lot. So visiting a lot of parks and a lot of cemeteries, which sounds quite strange, but the cemeteries here seem more like parks than they do macabre places of death. So that's been really awesome. And also the museums. I mean, you could just totally dork out, for days on ends in all the beautiful museums they have. So I've really enjoyed all of it, actually.
I'm glad. Okay, so let's get down to business. It's
business time.
It's now been almost 1.5 years, maybe even slightly more, since we talked about your relationships.
My sugar baby career, brief as it was.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's get on to that. So you were engaged in a polyamorous relationship. You believed that you were polyamorous, and you had two men, the Brit and favorite person, involved in this menage a trois.
I wouldn't call it that. I understand that that was a little funny, but I'm going to stop you and make a point that it was not a menage a trois. The two of them never even met each other. They had no interest in meeting each other. So in that sense, it was, I think, a very unconditional polyamorous relationship, because I was really the only one who wanted to be polyamorous. And I'm sure for all of those really sharp listeners out there, you'll notice I'm using the past tense. So the big news is that the Brit and I have broken up. We are no longer together, and favorite person and I are still together. We're still married. That, in a nutshell, is what has happened. It was just really, really difficult to try and make something work where I was the only person who really wanted it to work in the form that I was advocating. So, to be honest, I don't even know if the Brit would have decided to be with me long term if I had left favorite person. Probably not. So, any which way, I think my heart would have been broken a bit. Yeah, so favorite person, he's still my favorite person.
So, we're being a little bit, lighthearted about it because we've just started, the sun is shining. But actually,
birds are chirping.
They're chirping so damn loud. I don't know what is up with these birds around my neighborhood. This is Tottenham. I was expecting to have a few cockroaches, but there are tons of birds and they're all chirping their heads off.
And fewer cockroaches, because presumably they eat those.
That's true. That's probably what they're really.
Or do you have to be down and dirty bird to eat a cockroach? I'm not really sure. Are they that picky? I don't know.
Dirty birdie.
A dirty bird. Do you have to be a dirty birdie to eat a cockroach?
Maybe they taste like chicken.
Maybe they taste like lobster.
That's a bit left field, but yeah, it could be.
I think this whole conversation is left field. I'm sorry. I don't know how we even got on this topic.
Chicken
I
of
don't
the
even
sea.
know.
Cockroach of the street. I don't know. It's very hard to be serious when Ruby's around, because we just have so much fun together, and you needed a bit of fun. I think you were actually, you've been grieving a bit. Your heart, when you say your heart was broken, you're not using that euphemistically. You really believed that you were going to have a long-term relationship with the Brit.
Well, and, in some sense I did. He and I dated each other from from the beginning of when I was just full-on sugar baby and I was dating a bunch of other sugar daddies. It was almost 2 years that we were together. So I think by anybody's standards, that's a real relationship. And just so everyone knows, as of this recording, the timeline is it was just a few months ago that the Brit and I broke up. So it's been very difficult. Yeah, I have been grieving. I'm still grieving, really. It's a huge change in my life. He'd become such a huge part of my daily life.
So how did the breakup happen? What led to the breakup?
Oh, gosh, okay. Basically, there was a span of close to 2 months where he and I really didn't get any alone time. He had a number of overseas visitors, just one after the other. I had overseas visitors. And, when you have someone, and this is like family, closest friends I'm talking about, people that we were both really excited to see and we were happy that they had come to visit. But they take up a lot of time. And the way that the Brit and I had our lives structured, I didn't live with him. I had to try and fit him in when I could, and he had to do the same for me. He travels a lot for work, so people would come to visit and then he would be gone for 10 days on a business trip or something like that. And I don't want to make this sound as if it was all his fault, because that's definitely not the case. But he isn't the kind of person who's a natural communicator, and I found it really difficult to work on any little issues that came up when we just weren't physically in the same room. Yeah, so I think little by little over those few months when we didn't have any time together, little misunderstandings turned into big things that they really didn't need to, but they did. And then, I guess, he's the one who broke up with me. I wasn't the one who ended it. He was the one who ended it. And I really urged him not to, because I love him. And when you love somebody, you really, you want to be with them. I think that's such a natural thing. I think that it just all got too hard, and I think he's a bit afraid. I don't know.
I asked Ruby about whether or not the Brit was struggling with their unique setup more or less than FP. FP and Ruby have been going to intensive therapy sessions, both personal and marriage-based, for some time now, in order to come to terms with and process their feelings around the polyamorous setup Ruby really wanted. I want to know how it's been going.
I think that me loving someone and sharing life with them and then falling in love with another person and saying, no, I'm not going to choose one over the other. I'm going to try and make both of these things work. It forced all three of us to really question what we value and what we want. And I guess the answer for the Brit was that he wanted something else. Which obviously hurts because it's a rejection, but that's okay too. It's like everything happens in your life to teach you something. So yeah, I don't think that Favorite Person and I would have started the therapy that we did if it hadn't have been for this situation. And it's been really great. In fact, Favorite Person and I get along so much better now than we ever have done. And we understand so much more about ourselves. And when you understand yourself better, you wind up treating the people you love better. You don't have these kind of weird reactions that come out of left field and you don't even understand yourself why you're crying or why you're pissy with someone. You understand, and when you can understand something, you make it conscious, then you can make informed decisions about it. You can alter your own behavior and come closer to the kind of person that you want to be. So, that sounded a little bit cheesy, but really that's what it is, and I feel like that's what life is. You have to go into it with eyes wide open.
I can tell that Ruby is trying desperately to hold herself together. She's had this quality ever since she came here, a quiet containment of her sorrow over the Brit. Even as we've been having enormous fun, going on day trips to Brighton, attending gigs and galleries, going out dancing, I can feel that she's been turning it over and over in her mind. Everything that's happened between her and the Brit, trying to come to terms with it. But it's not like it's been easy. It hasn't been a piece of cake.
No, of course not.
It sounds like, intensive therapy like that. So you were juggling that, dealing with this forensic unpicking of your past, Favorite Person's past, the way you meshed together, the feelings that were coming up for him with regard to, I guess, feeling a bit threatened by the Brit.
Sure, yeah.
And that had quite a seismic impact on your relationship. Was there more pressure being put on FP and Ruby's relationship during this period when they had a magnifying glass on their relationship? Did the stress she must have been undergoing spill off onto her relationship with the Brit? At a time when she and FP were coming face to face with the rocky caverns of their internal landscapes, was there enough candlelight, the metaphor she's used before to describe the nature of her ability to love multiple people, to see where she was going with the Brit?
I think that Favorite Person and I figured out very quickly that we were codependent, and we kept expecting the other person to provide things and do things that we need within ourselves. And it's really not healthy to look for it outside of yourself. It's not healthy to expect another person to be your end-all, be-all. And we were both like that. And I think that before the situation with me dabbling in polyamory and, kind of forcing Favorite Person to go along with it.
So you no longer consider yourself to be a polyamorous person?
I don't know. It's difficult with these different labels and what they mean. If I didn't have to use one word to describe it, what I would say is I was in a happy marriage and I fell in love with another man in my mind that did not make me think, oh shit, I no longer love Favorite Person, the person I'm married to. I thought, well, I love both of these people. I want both of them in my life. I experienced the world differently with both of them and I love that experience, and I didn't want to stop.
It's fascinating that Ruby still thinks this, considering she's just had her heart broken in the midst of trying to make her polyamorous relationship work. She says she doesn't regret it, which speaks to her resilience, but there's also a defiant note in her voice, as though a part of her still can't quite believe it didn't work, that she couldn't, despite loving both men so much, make it last.
But maybe that makes me kind of a selfish person, but it didn't feel selfish. It felt like just more love, you know? And I really wish that society in general wasn't so dogmatic about one man, one woman, or lesbian, you know, like just one partner, right? Whether you're lesbian, gay, straight, whatever, that doesn't really matter, but it's supposed to be this one person your whole life.
I think you said something to me about how actually maybe it wasn't really a polyamorous relationship because not everyone, the other two weren't.
They never engaged with each other. Like if you read up on polyamory, very often what you'll find is that it's like one big happy family. And that's not to say that everybody has sex with everybody else. It's not like these are like huge swinging orgies. It's that the people who are in, let's say, a triangle like I was, right? I was what they call the pivot, and I had two partners. Those two partners, from what I could read about it, in a typical polyamorous relationship, would know each other. And under the best circumstances, they would be friends with each other. And they would support, you know, everyone within the triad, if you will, the triangle, they would support each other. So that I didn't get that. That's not what I had. I basically had two men who, because they loved me as much as they did, they put up with the fact that I had another relationship. In my mind, that's not really polyamory.
Yeah.
You know, I was striving for something and it didn't quite work. You know, and no, I don't regret trying because, as I said before, it's really helped me learn so much about myself. I know that it's helped Favorite Person learn so much about himself. I mean, he's really changed a lot. In many fantastic ways. And I hope that it's changed the Brit as well. I think that it did. I think I had a positive influence on his life. I mean, I know that I opened his horizons in a sexual way. That was quite a big thing in our relationship. He'd been married for a very long time, and it was not a particularly passionate relationship. They were more friends, especially in the later years. You know, sex was not hot and heavy. And, you know, he had lived in that relationship for most of his life by the time that he and his wife separated. So he didn't actually have, even though he's a bit older than me, he didn't have a lot of experiences. And then here I come along, you know, let's go do this, let's try that, you know, have you ever done this before? And he was just like, oh gosh, shit, okay, you know, he was up for it. He was an adventurer. I think that he was really in love with me, and I think that just scared the shit out of him. There's just so much that came along with our relationship that he was uncomfortable with. I think for a long time he just tried to ignore those things. And once we started bickering a little bit, and when I say a little bit, I really just mean a little bit. We did not have huge, screaming, knockdown, awful, abusive arguments. Number one, I'm just not that kind of person. And number two, neither is he. And number three, like, we got along too well for that. But once there was just the tiniest little sliver of things are not super easy between the two of us, it freaked him out and he just ran in the other direction. Like, from my point of view, that's what happened. And I think it's because he was really afraid of getting hurt. So it's much easier to be the person who abandons someone and to be in control of it than to make yourself vulnerable and have the possibility of having your own heart broken.
What sort of things were there that he was finding difficult?
I'm the kind of person who wants to talk about everything, as I'm sure you can gather from this entire podcast. And he is a lot more closed. And I think in the beginning of our relationship, when everything was like super lovey-dovey and you've got stars in your eyes, he really made an effort to open up and to tell me about himself and to share things. And then when the stakes got higher, he closed very slowly, little by little. It was harder for me to know what he was thinking about or feeling, and I kept butting up against that. I think from his perspective, he felt like I wasn't respecting his privacy, perhaps, but that's not in any way how I looked at it. I wanted to know what he was thinking, what he was feeling about things, and I wouldn't stop asking my questions. I asked lots and lots of questions, and I think there were moments when he got irritated with that because he was ultimately afraid. He was afraid of being hurt. But in the moment, you know, and I've got like months worth of perspective looking back on this now. In the moment, that's not what I was thinking to myself. What I was thinking to myself is like, why, you know, what the hell? Like, what's this all about? Like, why are you closing up on me? I got upset about it.
Let's take it back to the actual breakup, if you can explain exactly what happened.
Well, our breakup happened over the course of a couple of weeks, actually. We made plans to spend a weekend together, and when I arrived at his house on the weekend, he was visibly upset, and I asked him what was wrong. This is moments after I walked through the door, and he said, "I've been thinking about it, and I think we need to break up."
That look when you walked out the door, I didn't expect it to be the last. And you'd been promised so much more, making a clean break from your past.
And that hit me really hard. I wasn't expecting that. I mean, we had been bickering a bit before, as I mentioned. So I knew that everything wasn't perfect in our relationship, but for the two of us to just jump straight to let's break up was like a punch in the face. We spoke a little bit, and I asked him if he would just give it some time. It's like this felt very sudden. He was going to be taking a business trip, so he was going to be gone for, over a week anyway. And when he was coming back to the city that we live in, his wife was coming with him. He did not want me to meet his wife.
His ex-wife.
Well, technically they're not divorced. They've been separated for like 4 years or something like that.
Oh.
And they're friends, so he often goes to stay with her instead of staying in a hotel, which I'm like really relaxed about. That never bothered me. It did bother me, the fact, and one of the things that we argued about was the fact that he didn't want me to meet her. And I think the thing that I found very difficult in that particular argument was I was trying to explain to him, if you don't feel ready, if you don't want me to meet your wife, if there's something about this that makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. But talk to me about it. Explain what you're feeling. Make me feel like my thoughts and my feelings also matter in this relationship. The thing that cut me so deeply about that situation was that he was actually quite nasty about it. So he asked me one evening, like, "Oh, hey, my wife is coming, and how do you really feel about that?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm quite anxious because we haven't spoken about it. I don't know if I'm even going to get to meet her." And he cut me off, and he was like, "Of course you're not going to meet her. Why did you think you would?" And that just, I couldn't believe that, actually. That just the manner in which I was dismissed was really, really painful. Yeah, anyway, so the weekend we broke up, he said this, and I was like, "Listen, I think you're jumping the gun. I feel like there's so many things for us to talk about. We haven't had any time to talk about them because overseas guests and you traveling. Why don't you take these 2 weeks, like you're going to be traveling, and then, your wife will be here. I won't call you, won't text you, won't come over. You can have all the time you want with your wife. It's fine. And just really think about it." And he said, "Okay." So for those 2 weeks, I was just a total wreck. I mean, my stomach was in knots the whole time. I was crying all the time. Poor favorite person was just beside himself because, he wanted to help me. Of course, there's nothing anyone could do.
And you had to be a mom and stuff around all of that heartbreak and...
Yeah, of course. Actually, that kind of helped me. One of the things that I really love about being a parent is that it forces you to get outside of yourself. There are people more important than you in your world, which feels really nice. Yeah, so a couple weeks went by, and he phoned me. He phoned me actually from the car on his way back from dropping his wife off at the airport, so he did it like almost immediately. And I could just tell from his tone what the answer was. So we arranged for me to go to his house on a Saturday morning, and I expected that I would just go get my stuff. I had lots of things there, and that we would talk for, maybe an hour, and then that would be it. And I'd really resigned myself to the idea that, like, okay, like I had these little mantras that I repeat over and over again, and they just help me get through whatever difficult thing I'm going through in my life in the moment. I started repeating to myself, sometimes even out loud, if I was alone, in the car driving or something. He doesn't love you, he doesn't want you, he doesn't need you. And I know that sounds really harsh, but there's something in that made me feel a bit better. I've never been the kind of person who yearns for the lover. I don't pine for people.
I'm a big-time piner. I pine for friends and family who live far away, for favorite garments I've lost, but that's why it's so hard to hear about Ruby's uncharacteristic agonies. My pining muscles are well-trained, supple. Is this the first time she's felt this sort of pain?
I've never been the kind of person who wastes my time feeling shitty about the fact that someone that I want doesn't want me. The fact that they don't want me helps me get over them. So yeah, he doesn't love you, he doesn't want you, he doesn't need you. He doesn't love you, he doesn't want you, he doesn't need you. Over and over and over again. And then I got to his house really early on the Saturday morning. We were supposed to have lunch together, actually. And I sent him a message at about 6 o'clock in the morning saying, listen, I couldn't sleep last night. Can I just come over around breakfast time and get it over and done with? And he said, yes, of course, no problem. I arrived and we sat down on the couch and I first asked him how his trip with his wife was, her visit. And I was really surprised at how open he was, talking about it, how he felt, the conversations they had, how it was very emotional for him, but very good, how they'd spoken about things that they really should have spoken about years ago. And that was great. I remember in that very early conversation, the topic of his wife, I felt kind of shocked because I was really expecting for him to be very cold and distant with me, as he had been kind of before. And then we started talking about the two of us, and, he told me he just doesn't see the way forward and he'd rather cut it off now, and so on and so forth. And I said, well, I think you're making a mistake. We really love each other. We have a lot of fun together. We really like each other. That's not something that happens every day. Long story short, we were both crying and we were hugging each other, and I said, I have such an urge to kiss you right now, and I don't know if that's going to make things harder for me or easier. And he said, well, I think a kiss is just a kiss. It doesn't make it harder or easier. So we kissed. Honestly, it was the weirdest fucking breakup you can possibly imagine. I mean, I didn't want to leave, and he didn't really want me to leave. I wound up spending the night. So from getting there at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I kept checking in with him, and I was like, listen, if at any point you want me to leave, tell me. And he said, well, if you don't want to be here, I want, it's what you want. And I'm like, no, it's not. You know what I want. And every time I asked him, he said, no, I want you to stay. So we spent the whole day together. We walked around, we went grocery shopping, we cooked dinner together, which is something we always loved doing. We made love a few times. It was so confusing. I could not understand why he wanted to end that. It was so good. Sorry. I have to tell you, I really am not enjoying talking about this again.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's for the podcast. But, yeah, so I couldn't really sleep that night lying in the bed next to him. And it was really early the next morning that I got up and I left. And yeah, and that was it. So, I mean, we have seen each other a couple of times since then.
How's it been?
Really painful, but also completely amazing. I mean, that's the thing. It's I really think that he's being a complete idiot. And this is something that I told him when we were breaking up. He's making a decision out of fear and not a decision out of love. And I have to tell you, as cheesy as it may sound, when I look back on my own life, I know that the decisions that I have made out of love, those are the ones that have helped me to grow as a person. Those are the ones that I feel pride in. Those are the ones that, I know were the right thing, even though they were the hard thing. That's how I know that, as difficult as it has been for a favorite person, and it has been really, really hard, and it's been hard for me, loving him as much as I do, to watch him being in pain. But if I had just lied about it, if I had said, okay, favorite person, I'm just gonna chuck this man out of my life because you're afraid and I'm afraid, that would have been the wrong thing to do. It really would have, I mean, people may not understand, but it doesn't matter what other people think about my life. I have to live my life as fearlessly as I can. And I feel somewhat disappointed in the Brit because I thought that he was courageous. In so many other areas of his life, he is. It's something that I loved about him, that I love about him. But not this time, This time, fear won. And sometimes I feel I worry about him. I think that he's going to be very lonely. He's got a lovely life with a beautiful house and lots of money and, amazing trips that he takes and, shows that he sees and friends that he talks to. But none of them, he doesn't let them in. None of them really know him. And he's just going to be alone. And that's such a shame because I've seen him and I know how much he has to offer. And it just sucks.
We stop for a cuddle, and so Ruby can blow her nose. Then I ask her to finish her thought about FP. She said, that's how I know that he loved her enough to push through the painful self-examination that was a byproduct of therapy.
I really fully believe that favorite person just loves me as much as you can love another human. And I feel the same way about him. And I have a lot of trust in that love. I have a lot of faith in it. I always have, actually. Even now, that doesn't necessarily mean that our relationship is going to look one way or another. But I know that we will always have one. It will always be a truly open, loving relationship in which we're kind to each other. And yeah, favorite person is courageous like that. I think he's probably the best person I've ever known.
Will this go away? With me every day. The last cards may be, knowing all I had to keep.
Thank you for being so honest.
Yeah, sorry, it just
No.
devolved into tears.
You're
I don't know how
being.
much fun this is going to be for other people to listen to. I'm just
it's-
sobbing like a baby.
You're being honest,
I should have done my makeup after you interviewed me. I probably look like Alice Cooper.
Yeah. Ruby really tried to make something beautiful out of her relationship with the Brit. She had no template for such a relationship. No way to plot the outcome other than blind optimism. Maybe that's one of the reasons why the Brit lost his nerve, because very few people can live with that kind of idea of not fitting into a specific box.
Most people in his life did not know. For well over a year, his family didn't even know he was dating somebody. They didn't know I existed because he didn't want to tell them everything and he didn't want to lie to them at the same time, so he just said nothing. I think that the very few friends who knew the whole situation were not terribly supportive. And that's not to say that they outright judged him, but, they didn't ask questions about me. It was kind of like a topic like, we're just gonna leave that alone. We're gonna pretend it doesn't exist, I mean, that's at least that's the sense that I got. Whenever he'd go on a trip and he'd visit people, I'd ask, hey, did you speak to such and such friend about me? Did you tell him about what we get up to? And he was like, no, didn't really talk about it. I don't know. I don't know if I need to take that personally. Maybe that's just how he is generally. I don't really have anything to compare it to, but it just felt very lonely, like when you love someone, you want to talk about them, you want to share things. I don't know, at least I do. So I think that he would have found it very difficult within his circle of friends. Maybe I'm just particularly fortunate. Obviously, you know about everything, and a number of other people do. Really beautiful, close people to me who have never once made me feel judged, have never once been anything but supportive and loving. I seriously just have the most amazing friends in the world. I've told you so many times, like, my superpower and my number one talent is finding good people to surround myself with. You guys did good. You done good.
I asked Ruby where she and FP are now, and where do they go from here? In the wake of her heartbreak, how will they manage future relationships?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just kind of trying to take one day at a time, and I will always work hard at my relationship with favorite person. I don't know the direction that it is going in. But like I said before, I have faith in the love we have for each other, and that we'll always be there for each other.
It turns out I did speak to Ruby again, 6 months after this interview. Keep listening to find out if her heartbreak eased.
I couldn't lie to you, so I lied to me instead. I tried to hide in my own head. I could not lie to you, so I lied to me instead. And failed to hide in my own head. Safe from me.
I feel positive about it, which is really great. That's a very unsatisfying answer, but I can't say, yes, like, polyamory is the bomb and we're both going to start trying to date other people. I mean, my heart's just way too sore for that. I'm completely heartbroken. And, will I ever get over that? I don't know. At the moment, I don't really want to date anybody. I don't want to have sex with anybody. I don't even want to have sex with myself. I'm just like so depressed.
Don't punish yourself.
I know. I shouldn't. That's not fair. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it's just a bit too fresh. Interview me again in another 2 years.
I will.
And then see where it is.
Who knows what you'll be up to at
I
that
know.
point.
You
You'll
never
have
know.
invented something that no one else has done before. Like, I don't know, like, if the aliens will have come, you will be the first human to have a relationship with an alien.
Wow, okay, yeah, that sounds really awesome. I can't wait.
Luckily for you, they have 3 willies.
3 of them. That sounds like a lot of work, actually.
Actually, you're right.
Yeah, I prefer them to have like maybe 3 mouths and then
or 3
right?
tentacles that can reach. No,
that would be much better. 3 tongues.
Yeah. Yeah, with
get all my holes. Gross, sorry.
On the planet's, fellatio. Nah.
We make a joke about interviewing me in 2 years' time, but I really feel like in a few years' time, I am going to really be in an awesome place. Like, I am gonna just fucking break it apart and love myself and be really unconditional with myself. And becoming a sugar baby, meeting the Brit, attempting polyamory, all of that's a part of it. I try hard not to compare myself to other people, but every once in a while, I can't help it, and I do. And what this experience has led me to understand about myself is that I'm really pretty fucking fearless. And that's so cool.
This is when I deliver my final note, a truly profound commentary, and one which really demonstrates how far I've come in terms of my development as a crack podcaster. This is something I've been holding back ever since our conversation about the dirty birdies eating cockroaches.
Yeah.
Chicken of the street.
Oh!
Phew, feels so good to get that out.
Chicken of the street, that is so perfect. Esty for the win, man.
Thanks, high
High
five.
fives.
Yeah.
Love you.
You too. And on that devastating note of profundity, we skip ahead by 6 months. Ruby has come on another visit, and we sat down to discuss the state of her love life, how things have changed for her and FP, as well as whether she's gained a new insight into her relationship with the Brit, now that she's had time to process their breakup. Hi Ruby, you were a little bit heartbroken the last time we spoke. Can you catch us up on what happened between you and the Brit, and where you are in your life right now?
It's been such a long time, and I am in a very different place. So I think the last time we spoke, the Brit had broken up with me against my wishes. We hadn't spoken to each other for quite a few months. Of course, as it happens, as soon as I got back to my home, my usual city, the Brit contacted me.
Dun, dun, dun.
And he asked to see me, which of course I agreed to. And I just kind of spilled his guts saying how he made the biggest mistake of his life and he really missed me and he wanted us to give it a real shot, except that he wanted to be the only man in my life.
What?
He wasn't prepared to walk down the polyamory road any longer, and if we were to be together, that would mean that I would have to leave FP.
No. And this was really upsetting for you, wasn't it? I mean, I remember you kind of swinging between enjoying your time visiting in London, and it felt like suddenly emotion would come over you. And obviously at that point he hadn't got back in touch with you, so I think you were trying to come to terms with being broken up. But then, so it sounds like him then contacting you and saying I've made a mistake kind of brought a resurgence of all those old emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd really gotten to a place where even though I was still hurting, I felt ready to move on and give up the idea of this polyamorous life that I was trying to embark upon. And of course, you know what happens. As soon as, that person figures it out, somewhere in the deep, dark recesses of their heart, they must sense that, she's ready to forget about me. I better get in touch again, So that's exactly what happened, and it opened up a whole big can of worms because, of course, before that time, there had never been a question of me leaving favorite person. It had always been a question of, will we be able to make it work, 3 of us in this relationship together with me as the pivot in the middle. Obviously, that's not what the Brit wanted. So when he came back to me and said, hey, I love you, I miss you, I want you, but this is how I need my life to be, that was a huge thing for me to consider. I hadn't really put my thought process into trying to choose between one or the other. I was trying to make it work with both of them because I loved both of them. So, that was a very difficult time because I just didn't know what to do. And the conversation that I had with FP after seeing the Brit again and relaying this information to favorite person, gosh, it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. And what I asked from both of these men was to give me a little bit of time to figure it out.
Okay, I'll say it. Pick FP. I'm sorry, I'm partisan, but pick FP. Ugh, my nerves can't stand this.
And I think the fact that I even had to question what to do felt like a betrayal to FP. And I can understand that, but I needed to be honest in the situation. And I didn't know how I was going to walk away from somebody that I loved. So I spoke to both of them and I said, listen, give me the entire month of whatever it was, June or July or something like that, to think about it and to spend time with both of you. And at the end of that time, I will let you know. FP also made it clear to me when I spoke to him about all this that he wanted to remain married and that he, in some sense, agreed with the Brit. He didn't put it in those words then, but he also did not want to continue down the road of polyamory, and of course he didn't want to lose me, but he didn't enjoy sharing me. He definitely didn't enjoy sharing me. It was something that he'd agreed to do because I asked him, and that was better than losing me full stop. But both of us had gone down such a road of self-exploration, I guess you'd say, and he being favorite person was learning more and more about himself and what his own boundaries are and what he would be happy to live with and what he wouldn't be happy to live with.
I wonder how FP felt in this time. I can only imagine what that would be like. That, despite being in an extremely permissive relationship, to have opened yourself up to the possibility of polyamory, even though you might be terrified of losing your partner, then to have another lover break your wife's heart. FP watched her undergo some of the worst heartbreak she's ever had. He loved and supported her through it, no doubt comforting himself with the thought that at least it was over between them. Then to have her hesitate when the Brit resurfaced, I would be utterly devastated.
So I had a month.
So it wasn't like he gave you an ultimatum and said, this far and no further. Like, did FP ever say to you, I can't take this anymore, you have to choose?
No, FP never gave me an ultimatum. The person who gave me the ultimatum essentially was the Brit. And before he asked me that's not where my energies were directed. I wasn't trying to figure out who do I want to be with more than the other person. What I was trying to do was make it work, loving both of them. That's where my thought process was. That's where my energies were directed towards. So this was a very new thing for me. You know, in a weird way, I almost feel like it was a game of chicken. The two men kind of racing each other. And who was going to blink first, right? Who was going to jump out the car first? And it was obviously the Brit.
That was the last record scratch of the season, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. But also, what the what? He dumps her again after causing major havoc in her and FP's lives. And she still wants to be with him? Oh, Ruby, I fear for your poor heart.
It was the Brit because he was the one who said, you know what, I broke up with you, but that was a mistake. I actually love you, but I can't do this anymore. And that wasn't great for me. I was put in a position now where I had to choose, and I didn't know what to do. That wasn't what I wanted. So during the course of that month that I had to think about everything, the Brit and I did start seeing each other again. We started dating each other in the same way we had before he'd broken up with me. And I asked him so many questions. Obviously I was really worried that, okay, what if I do decide to change my entire life, rip my family apart? I want to be with you. And a couple months down the line, a year down the line, you change your mind again and you say that you can't handle it. You don't want to be in a relationship with someone who has children or with someone who has to co-parent with an ex. So as the weeks went by, it became very obvious to me that the Brit, he was not in it for the long haul. And in fact, he was the one who made the decision to break up with me a second time, even before we got to the end of the month. Yeah, which I have to say, it wasn't surprising to me. Of course, it was very painful because I still loved him, but I think I handled that time around much better. I could see the writing on the wall. Something that I said to him that I know really surprised him was that if he and I broke up, I didn't want to live in that area anymore. And FP and I had been speaking about moving to a different country for a couple of years on and off. And so what Favorite Person and I had decided before the Brit showed back up and threw a monkey wrench into the plans at the very end was that we would move, take on a different adventure and put ourselves in a new place and, see how that went for us. And whether we did that as a couple or whether we did that as co-parents, I suppose that was a bit up in the air in terms of how Favorite Person was also feeling in that moment. But we knew that we wanted to leave. And so I explained that to the Brit and I said, okay, I get it. I think you're making a mistake in the sense that you're giving up on something that's a real shame. But let's be together until I leave. I'm going to have a handful of months left in this country. I'm emigrating. So I love you. You love me. Let's spend that time together. And once I'm gone, then obviously we'll cut ties. And he asked me for a day or two to think about that. And I said, sure. And then when he came back to me, he said, yeah, okay, let's do it. And so we went away together for a weekend. It was actually our 2-year anniversary, and he was really awful to me the whole time. I mean, he was silent and moody and not interested in doing anything. He just sat in the hotel room the whole time. And here I am trying my hardest to engage him and have a good time, have some fun conversation. And it was like pulling teeth. It was really, really shit.
I picture her there in the hotel room, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. I see her desperately trying to recreate the passion they felt for each other in the beginning, the ease. She's thinking about how much pain this second chance is causing FP, picturing her children, her phone pinging with texts and images of them, as she waits for the Brit to do something, anything to make her feel it's worth it.
And then he took a business trip, and during that time away, he was gone for a couple of weeks, and while he was away, I hardly heard from him. It was just really different behavior than anything we had experienced in our relationship up until then. And I didn't really, what was the point of that? So when he came back, I fetched him from the airport, and we made amazing love. It was really intense, and I tried making plans with him for that weekend, and he was like, oh, I'm going to be a little bit busy with work. I'll let you know. That had also never happened before. And then I just didn't hear from him. He never bothered getting in touch with me. And there was something in being treated in that manner that it just broke for me. It just broke for me. And that was really disrespectful. If he didn't want to continue our relationship during the months that I was going to remain in the same country, then he should have just said that to me.
In the Brit's defense, I know, believe me, it goes against the grain to even say those words. It's very hard to say no to Ruby, almost impossible. When she looks at you with those big blue eyes, and she weaves her clever words around you, well, I just mean better men than the Brit have crumbled at her feet.
And instead, I feel like what he did was he gave me the answer that he thought I wanted, and then treated me badly so that I would leave of my own volition, which is, of course, exactly what happened. I phoned him up on the weekend, and it was just like, well, what the fuck, dude? Really? You're just gonna drop me like this? And he was like, oh, no, I've just been really busy with work. I'm like, oh, you're so busy with work. Well, I can hear that you're in a bar. You're obviously out having fun on a Saturday night, so you can't be that stressed with work. I mean, you're retired. How stressed could you possibly be with work? It was just a ridiculous, non-excuse, basically. And I told him something that I've thought about a lot since then. It's really true. I told him that for the very first time in our relationship, I felt used. I felt that day when I picked him up from the airport and I drove him home, which is something that I had done many times before. It was one of those special little things that we enjoyed doing. It was, one of his love languages is acts of service. And because he travels so often, obviously he could get himself home from the airport, but just being greeted by a face that loves you, it was a big thing for him. And I really enjoyed doing it. And to be treated in the way that he treated me after I did that for him, that act of service for him, it was so uncalled for.
Boo! Classic passive-aggressive breakup trick exhibited by the Brit here.
And I told him on the phone, it's the first time you've ever made me feel like all you cared about was the sex. You let me pick you up and drive you to your house. We had incredible sex, as we always do, and then I didn't hear from you again. So what does that tell me? It tells me that that's actually all you ever wanted.
I am enraged, I am enraged, I am enraged.
And he went quiet for a moment, and he was like, oh, that's not fair. And then he said, well, gosh, yeah, okay, I could see what you're saying. And I was like, you know what, fuck you. And I hung up on him.
Ruby is still clearly upset that the Brit let her down so badly in their final breakup. I can tell she really expected more of him. Maybe he'd change his mind and fight for their relationship in the light of the love he once professed to share. It seems astounding to me that even with Ruby's ironclad confidence, her and FP's very open and honest relationship, and all the other things that make them as a couple the epitome of what compersion truly means, it still ended in exactly the same way as many thousands of other relationships do. And that, dear listeners, is a lowering thought indeed. I asked Ruby to fill us in on what happened between her and FP during all of this, and where they are now.
There was a time, the kind of year before, when FP was just at breaking point. He and I had just started therapy together. The whole situation was really difficult for him, and he asked me, he said he needed space. And I kept pressing him, well, what do you mean? What are you asking me for? And he was like, I don't know, you're going to have to figure that out, but I need some space. And so I came up with the idea that the Brit and I take 1 month apart. So during that month, and we hadn't talked about this ahead of time, he stopped paying me. He didn't send me an allowance for the month that I didn't see him. And then once we started seeing each other again, after that month was up, the allowance just never came. And that was fine. That felt normal. That felt right to me because I wasn't a sugar baby anymore. He was my boyfriend. I was his girlfriend. We were embarking on this new adventure in which I was trying to forge a polyamorous relationship with these two men that I was in love with. And unfortunately for me, neither one of them was terribly into the idea. So there's a lesson for all you people out there listening to my crazy ass story. If you decide to try out polyamory, just make sure that all the people that you're trying to involve actually want to be polyamorous. I think it would go a lot easier for you if you did not do it the way I tried to do it.
That is very interesting and pertinent to this story because you were just learning yourself because you kind of figured out that you were polyamorous through doing the Sugar Baby adventure.
Right.
You know, obviously you're going to make mistakes, but with that in mind, what have you learned from this whole experience in terms of your sexuality, where you are now? Do you consider yourself to be polyamorous still? And if so, what would be your advice to other people going forward?
As you said, going on this sexual adventure did show me that I am polyamorous by nature. I have the capacity to truly love more than one person at a time and want to have those people in my life and to be intimate with them and to share domestic life with them. I didn't know that about myself before, so that's pretty big. What would I say to other people? Honestly, the most important lesson that I have learned through this entire journey is to be honest. To be honest with yourself, to be honest with your partner or partners. If you want to lead an authentic life, the only way that you have a chance of doing that is if you are brutally honest. And FP and I have spoken about the fact that the only reason that we made it through this, the only reason that we are still together right now, is because we were so honest with each other.
Yes, for those of you who are worried about the two of them, Ruby and FP are indeed still together. Thank goodness.
He's getting to a place, this is all, it's kind of fresh wounds for him still because the wounds went so deep. But, we're moving into a place where we can talk about things in a more objective way. And he's told me that even though if he could go back and do things differently, he would have wiped the Brit from the face, not from the face of the earth, but from my memory, if he could have chosen something, it would not have been this. But that being said, he realizes there are so many ways in which he has changed as a person and ways that I have changed as a person and how we've changed as a couple. And I'm so happy to report to you that we are in the best phase of our marriage that we've ever been in, ever. We're really, really happy with each other. The sex is great. We are laughing all the time. We're still pushing each other to learn new things and try new things. I think that we're both, kind of older and wiser. So something that remains a concern for me is because I have this capacity for polyamory, maybe there's going to come a day where I want to go out and date again. Maybe I'm going to feel the need to love someone else. And I think FP gets it now, at least a little bit, that won't mean that I don't want to be with him. But whether or not he's going to be able to accept another person into our life in the way that would make me the most happy, I don't know. I think that's one of those adventures that we will have to tackle it if and when it comes. But I definitely have the confidence in the two of us and our regard and our love for each other that we'll be able to weather that as well if it does happen.
If you met someone now and you started to fall in love with them, would you put the brakes on that or would you take it slower? How would you approach attempting a polyamorous relationship now?
Well, something I would do for sure is to talk about everything with FP before putting my toe in the water. So what happened before is that favorite person and I had an idea of this crazy ass sexual adventure. We were both into it. And along that journey, I fell in love with someone. That was not planned. It was not in any way discussed with favorite person. But when it happened, I recognized it for the significant experience that it was. And I was really honest with myself and FP about the fact that I couldn't walk away from it. When you fall in love with someone, how that changes you, what that means, how it feels. I couldn't say no. And I know that that was really difficult for him. That was so painful for him. And because it was painful for him, it was really painful for me. And I would never want to walk down that road again. And we've learned from it. And the thing that I've learned from it is, yes, I have this capacity for polyamory, but when I embark on a polyamorous adventure again, I want it to be hand in hand with favorite person. I want him to sign up to the adventure instead of me trying to pull him into it. So if I ever get the urge to, start dating people and looking for another relationship, I'll talk to FP about that first and make sure, okay, you know what, he feels like we're in a place for that. We'll not necessarily come up with rules. I'm not a big fan of rules, but just to understand each other's boundaries and take it from there.
So the final question is, do you regret your sugar baby adventure? And if somebody was going to do that, what advice would you give them?
Well, what do you think about what my answer would be? You know me really well, and I'm so curious to know whether you think I would do the same things the way that I did them.
Ruby has completely blindsided me with this question. And just like that, the tables have turned. The interviewee has become the interviewer.
I'll tell you the real answer. I just want to hear what you think first.
This particular thing, I think you'd be a bit wary. I don't think you'd do sugar babying again, necessarily. Unless, look, you guys fell on really hard times. If you knew what you knew now, and you hadn't done it, if you could go back in time, I still think you would do it. Because I think it's like you said, you and favorite person, though it was an incredibly painful journey with lots of ups and downs, I think you're the type of person who values this hard-won experience and knowledge, which you can't gain through walking the safe path the way that I too often do. And you're brave as well. You're really brave.
Or stupid.
Well, it's better than being really smart and never learning anything new, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you can be really smart without at least opening yourself up to certain experiences.
So what you're saying is, we are going to sign you up to a sugar baby dating site. Make a profile for you.
Totally. I am woozy wonky extraordinaire, and I'm. You can catch me on the
the A train.
Yeah, I don't even go on a website. I just hang out on the tube platform.
I really, honestly, hun, couldn't have put it better. I'm not the kind of person who regrets or feels nostalgia very often. I don't regret the decisions that I've made, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't. Knowing what I know now, of course, I'm going to take those lessons on board and make better decisions in the future. And that's the whole point of learning things. But something I wanted to say is that people like yourself who are a bit more risk averse, to use your term, I think the thing that you have to understand is the safe path is an illusion. So walking through the same routine every day with the same partner and the same people and the same job, or, the same kinds of activities all the time, you think that you're safe. And you probably feel comfortable in that. But you never know what's going to happen. And I'm the kind of person who would much rather invite the crazy-ass adventure into my life. I would rather do it voluntarily than feel like I have to go along kicking and screaming. And so my last little bit of advice is that you should go for it. Whatever it is in your life that you're interested in, sparks your interest, especially if you're a little bit afraid of it. I remember signing up for that Sugar Baby website. I remember loading the profile picture and having to write some information about myself and then starting the process of emailing these guys. I mean, it was all scary as fuck because I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't know where it would lead me. And I can't say that I'm at the end of my path because obviously, life carries on. But certainly my sugar baby days are behind me. But I could never regret it. And I'm telling you that you won't regret it. Whatever it is that you want to do, back yourself and say, I'm ready for the adventure. Because if you think it, if you will it, it will be.
That was the sound of a fist bump.
I love you.
Goodbye forever.
She doesn't love me, guys. Did you
I
hear
love
that?
you too.
I put the love out there and she
No,
just ignored
I have
me.
to do it like a soap. Remember Days of Our Lives? It was, I love you.
I love you.
I love you.
I love you.
Sorry. Just make it into one long vowel.
Oh my gosh, now I have to pee.
This is Sarah May.
And this is Ruby.
Signing off for the Sugar Baby Confessionals.
Thanks for listening.
When I was a child, I was an insatiable reader. Who am I kidding? I'm still an insatiable reader. But without access to Amazon Kindle or the ability to go to the library at my own convenience, I explored my parents' bookshelves, climbing like a monkey to get to the treasure troves inside the pages. These grown-up tomes opening up worlds from Middlemarch to Middle-earth. But sometimes I worry that I read much better then than I do now. Like a reverse gourmand, I gorged on the classics, barely understanding them at first, each line densely packed with coded, sophisticated secrets I was determined to break. It left me with an old-fashioned sense of romance, deeply embedded and sometimes entirely inconvenient notions of honor. These books shaped my malleable child's mind, until the notions of faithfulness to friends, family, and lovers is worked into the grain of me. And it's not always a good thing. I'm a terrible liar. I hate to be indebted to someone. Though I can love flawed people, I struggle to love my own numerous flaws. I'm frozen with sentimental ideas like a bug in amber. Even as my adult brain acknowledges and is fascinated by other forms of loving, and truly believes that Ruby and FP's honesty is way better than a life half-lived, strangled and repressed loyalty taking precedence over fulfillment. My own heart is as constant to my chosen people as the tide. I'm a one-person girl, is what I'm trying to say. And I've decided to reframe what I believe. Romance is the hope I cling to. That we're capable of love in these dark times is, frankly, miraculous. But what I've learned in doing this podcast is that the idea of fidelity is a match of the mind and not necessarily the body. Yes, for me, the two are enmeshed, but Ruby shows me again and again how infinite her love is for FP and vice versa, with an emphasis on the vice. In this, despite the blindness of passion which occasionally flares up for other people. Maybe one day she'll meet another Brit. Perhaps she'll enter into new polyamorous arrangements. Perhaps FP will. But the place where their souls meet, their sacred space, as Ruby called it, is inviolable. Why have I done all this, you might ask? What right did I have to intrude so rudely into someone's personal life? Permission, you might say, is not an excuse. You're perfectly right. So I'll leave you with a quote from one of my favorite books, Middlemarch by George Eliot. "I should like to make life beautiful," said Dorothea. "I mean everybody's life. And then all this immense expense of art that seems somehow to lie outside life and make it no better for the world, pains one. It spoils my enjoyment of anything when I'm made to think that most people are shut out from it." "I call that the fanaticism of sympathy," said Will impetuously. "You might say the same of landscape, of poetry, of all refinement. If you carried it out, you ought to be miserable in your own goodness. The best piety is to enjoy when you can. You're doing the most then to save the Earth's character as an agreeable planet. And enjoyment radiates. It is of no use to try and take care of all the world. That is being taken care of when you feel delight, in art or in anything else. Like Dorothea, I want everyone to be happy, to get love, to resolve differences. But like Will, I believe that taking happiness wherever you find it is as necessary as any other form of nourishment. Through this podcast, I hope to show the beauty of the struggle to create, to search, to befriend, to love, without judgment. Let's not be martyrs to other people's expectations of what is good for our hearts. Let's join Ruby in trying and failing and trying again, and let's allow that enjoyment to bloody well radiate. This podcast was produced and edited by me, Sarah May Tucson, with help from Beth Keane and Mike Scott. A massive thank you to the musicians whose kind permission allowed me to make this podcast far more beautiful than it would have been without it. You've heard Danny Green's albums Obituaries and Leish, Laura Francis's EP Restless Bed of Water, as well as Kristen McClement's album The Wild Grips. Also, Ricky Demiani was kind enough to let me use some music from his EP, How We Used to Live. These artists are incredibly talented, so do go out and catch them performing or buy their albums. Find out more about Leish by going to leishmusic.com, hear Kristen's work at kristenmcclement.com, go to Laura Francis Music for more information about Laura, and Ricky's work is available to stream on Spotify. Search for Mark Deer. I've also used some of my own band's demos, Scarlet Starlings. They're for an album we're releasing in 2019. For more news on that, go to my website sarahmaytucson.com or scarletstarlings.com. Look out for bonus mini episodes of the Sugar Baby Confessionals, in which Ruby will answer your questions and tell us what it's been like to listen to her experiences via the podcast. Season 2 will be a totally different story, Hair Today, and will feature guests Stephen Fry and author Joanne Harris, among many others. So look out for that. Our website, fablegazers.com, will have all the news and updates you need. You may have noticed that we put a ton of work into getting our podcast sounding as great as possible for you. We'll shortly be putting up a PayPal page on our website. If you have some money to spare and you've enjoyed our project, please feel free to donate. But the best thing to do to support us is to recommend it to other people. That and great reviews really help to make all of this worthwhile and keep us going. Email us on fablegazers@gmail.com and tweet us at @fable_gazers, or take a peek at our lovely Instagram account, with fablegazers one word. Names and details have been changed to protect the anonymity of those involved. This has been a Fablegazers production.
I am a petty ruiner, spoiler of your words. My mouth is like a sewer.